fun.
Hey, I just got a text message from Damo. Says, "Are you coming?"
Yep. We were going to call you live on air, but we decided against that.
I have to do the cameraman thing. I'm still not totally clear on that, honestly.
You suck at that, actually.
I do. Isn't it supposed to automatically switch back and forth to whoever's talking?
But you don't always want that.
Well, I always want that because then
you don't, because then as soon as you put the community links up and we start commenting, it switches back to us.
Are we on right now?
True.
Yeah. It's like the big yellow John.
Are we live?
We're live.
Are we seriously?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, do you want to hear my excuse of why I'm not? Why I'm having trouble?
Trouble with
long line at Chipotle. We know.
No, what I was doing.
Okay. While you were late, you mean?
Yes. So I'm just going to trust John to do the camera because I can't tell who's live right now. All right.
I can see you.
So I got my kind of yearly SSL warning that my certificates were going to expire. So I went to DNS Simple where I get my domains handled.
Yes.
And I re-upped my domains. So then I updated hanselminutes.com, which runs on pages, on ASP.NET web pages. And you see up here where it says secure. But if I go to the page, it's insecure. But it's not insecure. It's like, oh, we're mixed. We're so then watch this. If I clear the log and hit refresh, empty. This is a nice little tip. Right click, empty cache and hard reload. Watch secure. Screw it. Right?
Yeah.
So then, what do you do? It's what's the word for it?
Debug.
Debug. Right. No, like binary, whatever. Like I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just going to start deleting lines of code.
Yeah.
It's this thing. It's this commenting plugin called Intense Debate.
Is your Bitcoin miner?
Which is HTTPS. But here's the part that's confusing, because I was literally while you were texting me frantically, like get your stuff together, Scott, I was teaching my niece how to debug this problem. And I failed.
Oh, did you not just use the network graph there to find the thing, or the error console that would just tell you?
Everything is secure.
But doesn't the console print out?
Console usually says.
Usually tells you, right? There, right.
Oh, well, hang on. What is that?
Exactly.
Facebook.
How is Facebook even involved?
Because you've got Bitcoin mining going on in Handsome Minutes. Someone put a comment in.
Bitcoin mining.
Oh, it could be a Gravatar or the ad.
Facebook content thingy. Name not resolved. What is that?
It's an image. Oh, that's got to be a what do they call those? Like the one little pixel thing.
Tracking pixels.
I don't have any Facebook crap on my site.
Well, someone's bringing it in.
Oh, well, okay. So somebody, it seems like then, whatever this thing is, you know what it is then? This is a deeply old thing. It's probably some of this crap.
Windows Live.
It's probably that thing.
Yeah, probably. Also, I'm looking at the other warnings you're getting there, and it's very clearly stating what the problem is.
Yeah.
But the one above that one, read the logs, Scott. Read the logs.
I thought I'd see it here.
No, you won't see it.
You're absolutely right. So SSL cert.
That one looks troubling.
Basically, like that's a thing I've never heard of.
Will be distrusted. Users will be prevented.
There's all kinds of. There's a lot of stuff now with certs being like.
Oh no! Someone is saying the live.
Oh, look! You know what it is? Look what it is. That's New Relic.
New Relic.
There you go.
Let's get that one.
You're a genius. So
the idea that you could just deploy software and it works perpetually if it's connected to the internet is such a falsehood.
Dude, I felt so happy just doing this.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that.
You have mixed feelings about that?
Well, isn't the entire point of a copyright notice with a date to say that this content was created on this, like at that year?
Yeah.
Is there any legal
premise
for putting the?
I love that there's a guy named Datetime. I love that there's this guy named Datetime.
That's awesome. Is there a guy called like someone system.blah, or are they all reserved? They should be.
What about ticks?
There's no dots, I guess.
It's the best one.
At injects one, Twitter.
I love also that I can't submit this tweet.
Why?
Nope.
Because enter doesn't work.
Oh,
so control enter.
Okay.
Like, All right, that's what I was doing. How are you?
You should be using daytime
Okay.
offset.
Did we
How do
tweet
I-
that we just started this, folks? Before we get too much
How
further
do I
on?
unshare?
At Chancelman, at
Oh,
daytime
I-
offset.
Can
At
you,
daytime
can you make me
offset.
unshare?
Yeah, don't use that date time, by the way.
At daytime offset.
Dave Tide offset. Why?
Yeah, because you just used the
'Cause you
local
want it-
time zone.
Yeah,
the
that
server.
way
No,
it's
you
local
wanna
to
use the
the.
time-
It'll be local to the server. In
No,
that case,
they're both-
PST.
But it's not about locality. Daytime offset is about actual times that occur.
Yes.
Time is just about a time that is written down. It's not specifying a particular time that exists.
Okay, do me a favor then. Open up Notepad, share your screen, and explain that again.
I'm just BSing because I don't know the real difference.
So
There
you don't
is
really know.
someone on the team who does.
I'm smart enough to know there is a difference.
The reason I say that is that there was a time 15 years ago when I literally knew a lot of this stuff.
Mhm.
And then, like, really did. Like, I knew date times more than anybody. The Brad Abrams time frame.
Yeah.
Then things got more complicated. Then John Skeet knew more than anybody. Now I don't think anyone knows.
So the site is broken. John, I don't know whether you pasted the
Live site.
Yeah, I don't know if you pasted the
No,
URL
you did
in
that thing
wrong.
again.
What's that?
Which thing did I do this time?
Well, the URL's wrong. Like,
Oh,
The URL, it has to be just the embed bit,
I
No,
thought I did
not the
it.
whole thing. You have to dig
No,
the embed part out.
Does
What?
ASP.NET not support validation of
It does.
text fields?
Damien
It actually
Edwards does not support validation.
it's not the embed. No, I don't know what it is.
The
have
embed
to put
URL
the
looks
entire-
right.
It doesn't have the embed URL in it. It's supposed to have the word
Hmm.
embed.
All
Let me
right.
see if I can change it.
I'm Googling date time versus daytime offset.
Yeah, there's a good MSK.
I fixed
love
it.
this.
I fixed it. I
Choosing
fixed it.
Oh,
between
good.
choosing
fixed it.
between the 5811 things. Time zone,
Right.
time zone info, date time offset, time span.
At a time.
Whatever happened to the days where it's like, no, just use daytime UTC.
I mean, you can, but the type doesn't encode enough information for all the types of things that you might want to do with the date time. And some would argue that even the types in the system, no matter what you use, still don't.
What I want
sorry.
is a server-side representation of date time at the client's
Yeah, good luck with that.
locale.
That exists. that exists.
Right? Isn't
It's
that
just
what I want?
You have to construct it from
'Cause
first
I want
principles.
I want the trolls that every year tell me that my copyrights are wrong to sit there on, they spend their New Year's Eve hitting refresh at 11:59 on my website.
But to Damien's point, there's kind of the copyright is issued when you write the copy.
Right.
And so,
Brad just commented on Twitter that you are not required to put a year in the copyright declarations anymore. So maybe some legal precedent has been set now. And
I know, but if you're going to be pedantic, this is the show.
This is true. This is absolutely true.
there should be a thing when you mouse over the copyright, it pops up that little tooltip that says, I don't need a date here.
I enjoy every year, just someone bothers me about this copyright and I will tweet them back, got pedant? And they think I'm talking about totally different stuff.
Oh dear. Is your I've just noticed something about your background today, Scott.
Uh-oh.
Your arcade, your main machine is actually on.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Is there a high score you're working on currently that we're interrupting you from? This is why he was late, ladies and gentlemen. It was nothing to do with debugging any stuff on his
is my frame rate okay?
Because Street Fighter 2 over there. It might be. I won't be able to tell you. Our link here is
I can't tell.
Lego
No, I was honestly, it runs Windows 7 and I needed to run it. I needed to update it. Is it working? Am I frame rate? Am I frozen?
No, like it's all frozen. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
We're getting about a
that's
frame every 7 seconds right now from you.
Yeah.
Let me switch cameras.
There we go. That's better. Much better. Worse quality, but an actual frame rate now.
It's just the Logitech Brio being special. I'm pretty disappointed in it. I wanted to update Windows 7, and I turn that thing on every 6 months to make sure it still works, plays games, entertain family members that come over.
Yep.
And yeah.
Excellent.
And I have new action figures too.
Oh, that's great. What did you get?
I
What,
got
a Christmas present or something? Or?
Yeah. I
From
got
the boys?
the new Iron Man,
Oh, nice.
Iron Heart.
Is that 11.5 inches?
It's no, it's huge. It's at least
Well, the figure, I mean, not the
the
not
figure.
with the plate.
Yeah, she's 11.5 inches.
Nice.
Yeah. All right.
I knew
Hi,
that 'cause
Alon.
I watched a documentary
Alon
on
is here.
toys last night.
Oh,
Yes.
Scott. Hi, John.
Great. Goodness.
Hi, Damien.
Lovely. What's up, brother?
Not much. New year.
How's it going?
New issues to deal
New
with.
issues to do, new framework features, stuff. John, do you love Community in the
I
new
do love
year?
Community. I have links to prove it.
Okay.
What do you think of that? Okay. Here, I'm sharing my screen.
And did you force it to stick to you so it doesn't show up when we talk to you?
I'll do my best. Okay, so this is
Oh,
what?
it's staying. It seems like. Hang on. Is this one of your tab extensions that you're?
He has so many extensions, but he's hiding it.
You guys, just to make you happy, I got rid of all my tab extensions. I no longer have any tab extensions on this computer. Oh, actually, I do. I just hide them before I talk to you. All right. So anyhow, these are the links I will be presenting. There's a QR code for people that do that thing, and it's already in the description for this deal. I got a bunch from Andrew Locke. So this one, the main reason I'm pointing this out is this is an excerpt from his book coming out soon. It's been in MEAP, M-E-A-P, for a while, Manning Early Access Program. But this is an introduction to middleware. So this is really cool, and this is part of, you can get the whole first chapter for free. But here, this is kind of an introductory, what is middleware? So, yeah.
So what is middleware? Is there like a...
Well, I haven't read the whole first chapter.
Pithy answer? Or
You only scroll
do I have
down
to read the whole book?
What is middleware? Look at
The
that.
Reader's Digest version?
Read the page if you want to learn what middleware is.
That's a short scroll bar. That's a lot of words.
So this is an introduction here. Yeah. Get ready, because it's
good.
Andrew Locke ramps up. Yeah, here we go. So here is the .NET Core Docker files.
Ooh.
What I love about this is he goes into all the different possible Docker files that there are that you could use for ASP.NET and .NET Core, explains what's in them. But here's the gold, I think, is he explains at the end of each one, when would you use it?
Exactly. You know what's great and terrible about this? It's great that this content exists.
And it's all going on.
What's terrible is that we should have written this content. It should be somewhere on our doc site.
You said it. I didn't.
Yeah, I'm being totally honest.
I wonder if we could like link over to it or something. I know there's like
that's not a good practice to get into.
Can we partner with like these people and be like, hey, can we rip off your content?
That wouldn't be the first time.
And give you credit.
Yeah, of course.
And get it.
No. I mean, like, I don't mean it would be
idea.
the first time that we've stolen people's content. I mean, for example, jQuery, famously, all of its content, good documentation came from an agreement with Pact Publishing, which is how they got all of their great API docs for jQuery, is they did a cross-licensing deal, and that's how they got it. So, I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to suggest that if we see great content, the doc team approaches them and we say, hey, we'd love to, use this as a doc. Could we copy it and like attribute it and go from there? But this is great. Like, this should exist. Like, here's all the Docker files, and this is when you should use it, and this is what it does, and this is what we change, what the tags mean.
I love, he's got the what should use it for at the end of each one, and then at the top of each one, quick bullet points, what's in it. So yeah, it's just beautiful. I love it, because I forget from time to time. I'm like, which was the one with the, So for instance, here he talks about the ASP.NET Core build, has the pre-warm package cache, stuff like that. So good stuff.
And as Christian just pointed out on the chat, like, of course, we could just ask Andrew to, like, hey, this is great. Could you please send a PR and like send this as a doc and help us turn it into a real doc? All of those are good options. Yep.
So. Cool. One other one from Andrew Locke. It's been a month since we talked. He's been busy. This is ASP.NET Core apps using Cake in Docker. So using Cake for build files. And he explains some things about, he talks about, first of all, you may be tempted to jump in and use the Cake Core CLR package, but that only works with .NET Core 1.0. So he talks about why he used the mono-based one to start with, explains all the different stuff about, optimization for Cake build scripts in Docker, all that kind of stuff. So nice. And you see here the tiny little scroll bar. There's a lot to this one, but very useful. All right. Moving away from Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. So this is from Francisco. This is actually part 4 of a series on Mini Blog Core. So Mini Blog Core we've featured before. That's from Mads Christensen. And here he's been deploying it to a lot of different things. So here he's deploying it to Azure Managed Kubernetes. So he kind of walks through the steps. What do you need to do? Configuring your storage, getting everything set up for that. So nice kind of step-by-step, has everything you need to do to follow through the list.
Was that just a file new, or was that an app? Oh, it's Mini-Blog. Got it.
It's Mini-Blog Core. Yep.
Got it.
Cool. All right, this is from Couchbase. This is actually from Matthew Groves, who's a dev evangelist at Couchbase. Yeah, and so he wrote about distributed caching. They've got a cache and a session middleware that the Couchbase team builds. Those are out on GitHub. Yeah, and so he kind of goes through and explains how to implement it and everything. So I wasn't aware that they put this much work into, Couchbase as a backend for ASP.NET Core.
No, this is great. They've built a distributed cache provider for Couchbase, for Couchbase for ASP.NET Core. That's fantastic.
Yep. All right. This is a series from Anthony, and he is using SignalR with a SQL table dependency. So he's using Google Charts.
I would love to know how he did this, because my understanding is we don't support SQL table dependency in .NET Core. I thought that was a full framework feature only.
So that is in part 2. It's a 3-part series, and he goes through and shows where he's registering it. He says, he even calls it out. This is the exciting part. He said most exciting, but I think he means most. But so here he's registered it, and he's got to change it.
I thought that type. I didn't think that one got ported over to Core. All right.
Yeah. So there it is. So pretty cool.
Supposed to be excited or freaked out when you say stuff like that?
I'm checking because I just want to figure out whether
assume
or not
you know all stuff, and then when something shows up like that, I'm like, oh my god, Damien doesn't know that.
Yeah. Then
we all
who do you trust now? Yeah.
I mean, there's a package on NuGet called SQL table dependency, which is a little worrying.
There you go.
It's actually interesting when you Google for .NET Core SQL table dependency, literally the top 10 results are all to do with SignalR. Which is surprising.
So this is out on GitHub. I mean, I guess we could look.
Can we? Sorry, I need to understand how this works.
Can we stop everything and just go and look at some source code?
Please.
Yeah,
wait a second. Wasn't it me that just did that a minute ago? So
go to the project file. Open the.
Let's not delay broadcasts because of debugging.
Yeah, see, he's using the package.
I blame myself.
I don't think it's in. I don't think it's actually in .NET Core. I have a feeling
it's coming from that, right?
Someone owner is Christian. Is this the person who wrote the blog? Christian Del Bianco. Okay, so this
is Anthony Giaretti.
So 7 months ago they released 6.0, which was the first version. So there must be some context there that we're missing. And it has no dependencies. It's interesting. It looks like the package targets full framework, though. I need to get to the bottom of this. This is interesting. All right, you guys maybe keep going, and I'll play around.
Cool. Okay, this is a nice one from the .NET Thoughts folks, or from Anuraj, and we featured some of his stuff before. He's got a cool little tip here on setting up different launch profiles in VS Code. So if you want to, debug and launch with Chrome, Firefox, IE, etc., he shows how to set up your launch JSON to do that. So nice little tip. I got to talk faster. Talking.NET, this is kind of a run through of your different options circa now for bundling and minification. So he talks about bundler minifier, gulp, web optimizer, and grunt. So kind of just here's your different options right now.
No Webpack?
He's got Smig. I don't see Webpack.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. All right. That's a good point. And then, then there's a bunch of other ones too. I don't know. Those are the ones he listed. Okay, so Janek, this is, I don't know how many times I've had to do this back when I was working in financial companies, exporting to Excel and CSV and ASP.NET Core. So I wasn't aware there's this EP Plus package that different people have been updating over time. And so it is a Excel export, and it has all kinds of, rich Excel features like column grouping and all kinds of stuff. So here he shows just using it with that. And then if you want to go simple, exporting using CSV. So just, some nice utility code to have around, returning files, text, CSV, etc. All right. Long series from Raihan Alam on ASP.NET Core Identity. So he's not quite complete on it, but he's working through this. This one is the kind of getting started, and he's building up to an Angular 4 front end. This one from Jerry Pelser. This is on creating authorization policies dynamically in ASP.NET Core. This is actually a tip he learned from a talk by Dominic and Brock Allen at NDC Oslo. So he just talks about hey, here's you know, here's how to do it, creating authorization policy dynamically. Okay, now we've got some more kind of auth stuff. This is Damian Bowden talking about using EF Core. In this case, he uses SQLite, but he says you may also want to use something like Service Fabric, etc. So this is how to put your configuration data store in an EF Core database. So, and as usual with Damian, a lot of code here. It's very in depth. So, good stuff. Speaking of identity server, I just wanted to call this out. These you know, Dominic and Damian doing Dominic and Brock, sorry, doing tons of great stuff in the community, and here they've started a Patreon page to, you know, so you can support them. If you're using identity server, I recommend that you go out and support them on Patreon.
That's fantastic. This is cool. A growing sentiment I've noticed, which it doesn't take a lot of skill to notice. I've just seen it happening a lot in the community recently, not just in .NET, but across open source in general. Is there seems to be a lot more voices coming out and stating declaratively that we need to help open source contributors, or sorry, project owners, and reward them for the efforts that they're doing. You know, a lot of companies I think are using open source, but very few of them are giving back. We all know that, and yet are still expecting to get, and you know, in some cases, pretty much demanding that, you know, their bug gets fixed or, you know, whatever. And I'm seeing more and more people giving talks and more articles where they're proposing, you know, frameworks and process changes and things for and approaches to using open source that are, you know, beyond just the FOSS type of movement, saying if you're using software for commercial reasons, and you know, you need to factor into that what it means to support where that software comes from, and not just from a feeling good point of view, but from a risk mitigation. Like if that person gets hit by a bus, like who's going to fix that code? Like, I mean, this is the reality of this type of world, is that open source isn't free. The expectation, it works best when practically everyone who uses it is also a contributor in some way. And there needs to be more than just one person who can, you know, carry on and you know, look after the project. It's not all companies like Microsoft, obviously.
Absolutely. That's a big thing that I've been thinking about and looking at with .NET Foundation in general, is the whole kind of, you know, these open source projects, we want them to, like, for selfish reasons, like you said, we want them to be around long term. So what can we do to support them and make them long-term survivable, not depend just on one person, not depend on somebody having some free time here and there, but, you know, make it a thing, you know? And so like over December, I actually spent a good amount of time going back and forth with Brock and Dominic, trying to figure what would be the best thing for them. We've set up Open Collective under .NET Foundation. In this case, we both decided Patreon worked best for them. And Patreon, this is kind of something where you don't need an umbrella organization, so they didn't need to do this under .NET Foundation. But this is something where both that and Open Collective can be good for a project to have sponsors and take donations and that kind of stuff.
What's the 20-second explanation of what Patreon is? Like I've seen it mentioned in the news recently. They did some fee change and then rolled it back because everyone was really annoyed. And this is the first time I've ever seen the site. It looks like a Kickstarter, but it's not an actual.
It's more about ongoing supportive stuff. So
yeah,
to put it in Hanselman terms, if I ever quit and decide to do YouTube full time and blogs, I could do advertising based stuff, which then people might question my loyalties. Or I could say, hey, everybody who likes my blog, give me $1.
Okay.
And then if I have a couple thousand people give me $1, I could live on that, right? The other option would be using things like Brave or Tip. You know, it's basically an online tip jar. But with Patreon or Patreon, I don't know which it is, you could say, well, there's a secret place for get Hansel minutes two days before the public sees it, or only get custom videos, or once a month I'll Skype you.
So it's almost like you can create a little membership type thing as well.
Gold, silver, and platinum, right? Yeah. Exactly.
So like it's not new, the idea of someone who has, you know, gives out content freely, that they have a contribute button or a donate button, but typically they would have gone to like it's just like PayPal, right?
But it formalizes and centralizes it and tells you will receive a thank you tweet, etc. Now that's different from Open Collective, which is this is just give money to these folks. Open Collective is open, democratic accounting.
Accounting is the key thing.
If you go to opencollective.com/webpack, which is the Webpack JavaScript project, you can see, or .NET Foundation, but Webpack's a good example because they're huge, right? .NET Foundation's just getting started.
Go on, sorry, go on.
Webpack, you can actually see where one of the founders of Webpack decided to go ahead and click on that rather than me.
That's interesting because I'm just looking at the GitHub repo of the first, the SQL table dependency thing we were looking at before. And I'm reading the README, and literally at the bottom, there's a donate paragraph, and he has a button that goes off to pledgy.com.
Right. It's a whole world out there. So can you all, if you project to everyone, John, you can see like, the guy who works on Webpack went to a talk and needed an Uber. So
look at that.
The expenses are transparent.
Wow.
So both money coming in and money going out, you can see everything. So the idea here is this is an open source approach to finance, right? And this is great because, maybe for an open source project, you don't want to just, I don't know if I give money to an open source project, what are they going to spend it on?
How does the budgeting work? So hang on, this creates a limit around. There's the budget and available balance there is like $54,500.
This is how much money they have in their account.
Really?
So this money has been donated.
Because it's open source. Why not make it transparent?
No, I understand that. But then is the idea that they can't get access to that money unless they list an expense?
Correct. Yeah, it actually gets paid out.
So it's basically held in escrow for purposes of supporting the open source project.
Yeah.
And then how much due diligence does the Open Collective do with what the money is used for?
The Open Collective's job is not that.
Yeah,
I just create a thing that says, I need.
They're not an auditor, so but it is more of they are holding it, and they do approve expenses. I'm sure
who's approving and rejecting all this stuff? I see one there was rejected for $2,100, whereas another one that was just marked as a bunch of work was approved. Sorry, this is fascinating. This is like
you like that?
This is just super interesting. So why was that rejected? Can you just click on the title? Does that take you to, and who made the, who made that? Who made the decision?
I'm clicking back and forth.
Click the detail.
Click on the rejected button.
I'm clicking on all these things.
Click more things, John.
The word details. Click on the word.
I don't know. It doesn't say why. That'd be a good question. So the woman who started this project is Pia Mancini, and she is on Hansel Minutes episode 592.
Okay.
And you can learn about when they created this. It was not meant originally for open source. It's about the liquid democracy and about supporting organizations. It's just open source really, works for this.
This is fascinating.
It is
world out there.
It's interesting because Open Collective really, in comparing these and working with Brock and Dominic on this, Open Collective really has turned into a very open source focused thing. If you look at their,
look at that, yeah.
So these are all, their meetups. It's all code focused now.
Code, yeah.
If you look instead at Patreon, now I'm going to feel self-conscious.
It's very YouTube-y.
Yeah.
But it's also people who make art, people who make artistic. It's right there. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I must admit, the only context I think I've seen Patreon mentioned, in my Twitter feed, has been people who do photos on demand, or
exactly.
Oh, look, right. Scroll up a second. There's a person there making videos, right there.
Right.
Kind of funny is making internet videos. Let's click on that. Oh, you go, Issa Rae. I know her.
Let me show you this. If we scroll down, these are all the different types of creators they call out.
Yeah, see?
I don't see any code there. So, obviously it's working great for the identity server folks, but it is kind of like you're part of it's not, it's kind of a, hey, we support everything kind of thing.
Well, it's like when people were using GitHub to do stuff that wasn't code. So
sure.
I don't think it's a stretch to imagine that in the future, if more open source projects use this, then Patreon might start adding explicit categories and features for those people.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So very,
so
like you said,
$2,000 a month, right? And then that can be used to fund content.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So that number is saying what she's asking for, or what?
No, that's what is she currently actively receiving.
These are her current subscribers here.
Oh, because they subscribe. It's like it recurs.
Right, and see, it says unlock it now. See, so she's famous now. Issa is on HBO, but she started as a web content creator.
I see.
Right, so she now has a digital platform. So if someone makes short films, she can give those writers and those directors visibility and reasonably transparent expenses.
This is fascinating to think that something like the .NET Foundation, John. I mean, obviously, you just said you were involved in setting this up with but this could very easily become a default, or at least a lot more common thing for a project.
Yeah. And what we'd like to do actually, now that we've got it set up, is to make it just part of when a project joins .NET Foundation. We just, that's part of the checklist.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
interesting.
So one thing that is interesting with Open Collective is you do need some, like you said, an account, or like an escrow, somebody to hold the money for you. And so there was a good amount of work set up to create new accounts, to create new like accounting things so that we can hold the money without it getting muddled in with the rest of the .NET Foundation's money. So yeah, so this was kind of a behind the scenes thing I've been working on.
Sweet.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So that's them. I've got a bunch of quick hits for Steve Gordon. He did his first ASP.NET video. He's actually done one since then. So he talks about how he did it, and then he talks about, this is a nice short video, I think like 5, 10 minutes, 8 minutes on exploring it, application startup. And then he has another one on Docker as well. So that's exciting. He's been writing a ton of great posts, and it's nice to see him doing some videos too. Speaking of great posts from him, he's done a series of gotchas. Here was one I think we may have mentioned before, actually, but this was on environment variables and understanding delimiter differences between different environments. So whether colons or double underscores are required. He's continued that series during December. He did one on launch settings.json being picked up during .NET Run.
Yes.
And this is something where if you just blindly copy your entire folder over, then your launch settings.json settings will get picked up as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important reminder that especially when major versions come out, while we increasingly rarely will make breaking changes even on minor versions, we will add features that can constitute a breaking change. Such that the presence of a file before may have had no side effects in a certain context, but in a new major version, it might. And this is a classic example where we added the feature of honoring certain aspects of launch settings from the command line, not just Visual Studio, which was always the intent. Launch settings wasn't conceived as being a Visual Studio specific feature. It was always meant to be something that other tools could leverage moving forward. We did it in 2.0, but if you didn't read about it and you just sort of updated, then it might take you by surprise. And to a lesser extent, that also occurs in minor versions. We add features, and if you're not aware of them, you can run into them and then wonder, oh, how did this happen? I've never seen this before. It's like, well, we added that feature 2 minor versions ago. You just haven't happened to run into it. So yeah, sometimes it's our fault. We don't do a good enough job of disseminating all the details around changes that we make, which is something we obviously continue to improve on. And sometimes I think people just update blindly and assume everything's going to be fine. Like I think it's a balance there. You have to make sure you're reading stuff, and we have to write it.
As you pointed out, it can be tricky because when you go between 2 arbitrary versions, there could be, there's a big list of things you may have missed between minor versions, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, one last from him, and then I'll try and wrap up so we can get on to Alana and friends. So here we've got, here was one where his hyperlinks weren't working in Razor Pages. And he had not realized that there was a separate view imports for Razor Pages as opposed to the main view imports for views. So important thing there that there's view imports. You do need one for your pages as well.
Oh yeah, yes. I guess the other way, yeah, they're hierarchical. So
yeah.
When loading a page and it scans upwards to find them, there are common locations that it'll look for, but the pages. How to say this? Unless it's in the shared folder of the views folder, the pages won't find it. So
cool. Okay. Right. And one last one. This is from Matt Warren. I'm just going to make you aware of it, and you can go read into it in more detail. But this is talking about open source .NET in general. 3 years. What's it looking like? He has some cool things where he, goes into some statistics. Here he's got this nice graph where you can find out actual community versus Microsoft.
It's actually interactive too.
Yeah, yeah.
Click in places and it does stuff. Yeah, like you hover over it and.
Well, so that's down here, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So
I'm always fascinated when people blog articles like this. It's like, oh my god, it's so much work.
Very nice.
So well done. Matt Warren is a star at this kind of stuff.
He's a star at a lot of things. What's very nice, I think, here is he keeps the drop downs in sync. So if I go to Core FX Lab, it updates both of them.
Exactly. Like he didn't just drop some snippet in, right? Like he had to cut
like
Yeah.
previously, I wrote his own version of the CLR that projects this custom version of JavaScript that enables this to happen.
Probably.
Regular people can't do this.
That's fantastic.
All right. I'm out.
Well, should we talk
I
about?
have to go. I just
Should we talk about the elephant in the room?
Oh, wow.
Or
I'm going to have to step away for a second.
what? Okay.
Oh my god.
No,
Me too.
so I have a
So
good reason, actually. Let me show you why. You jerk.
All right. All right.
Hang on.
Okay,
We're just
Do I
looking
have
at ourselves.
Am I presenting? So
Yeah.
we recently added the ability
The blood sugar.
to have blood sugar in the prompt
Are you
of
crashing?
my PowerShell.
Wow.
And-
so you're gonna be in a coma soon.
And I'm
Yeah.
pretty happy about this addition. I added in linking with PoshGit, so I can have my Git status
Beautiful. Beautiful.
and my live blood sugar.
Does it say commit now? Your blood sugar is getting low, and we don't want you
Good
to.
point.
While you
Yeah.
have to step away.
Can you clone some orange juice?
Yes, holy crap! Go get
It
some
says
sugar.
that. Go get some sugar.
That's awesome.
So
All right.
I will be right back.
Okay.
Please don't stop on my account. I'll be right back.
All right. I will switch over.
I was just going to speak very briefly about some of the big themes this year. So January, obviously, it's a new year. As arbitrary as that date is, just means we got to some point around the sun, obviously. We often like to try new things at this time of the year, and we're still in the middle. Obviously, our last release was still a major release. We're working towards the next minor, but we haven't shared an awful lot of structured detail about it yet. We've kind of, I've spoken about things on here, but we haven't done blog posts. We only recently, just before the holiday season, did an effort to make a lot more issues sort of public that we've been working on. There've been a smattering of them, but a lot of the work was still in sort of planning phase. There's a lot more of that stuff that's public now, which you can go and sort of troll our GitHub repos for. But we haven't done a blog post. We haven't done a coordinated session with the .NET folks or anything about this is what we're doing in 2.1. This is the themes and all that type of stuff. And we haven't done a sort of a full year. This is what we want to cover in 2018. So we will do that this month, all those things. And so we will have I think it's Scott, my boss, Scott Hunter, and Richard Lander, who's my equivalent for .NET, and myself will do a Channel 9 video to talk about the 2.1 stuff. And we'll try to do a blog post the same day that gives a high-level sort of overview of all the themes and all the features that we plan or that we're currently working on for 2.1. And hopefully we can share something about a schedule. Schedules are always a tricky topic because we don't have a crystal ball. But we will try and share as much as we can. But just rest assured that we're working on stuff for 2.1, and we still, currently plan with a very lowercase p. It's not a promise; it's a plan to have a 2.1 release out sometime in the first half of this year. We just don't know when yet, and there will be previews as normal, and we hope to do an RC and all that type of stuff. But we'll get more details about that before the end of the month. So yeah, so that's, it's all goodness. We have some themes that I've already covered off on. We've made some really good, previously on the show, we've made some really good progress on a lot of those things. What's not particularly good right now is trying to use them. Like if you're brave enough to try and use that stuff using our nightly builds, there's been some fairly large changes that haven't fully rippled through the end-to-end yet, which can make it a little hard to consume a lot of those changes. And so hopefully that will get better over the coming weeks as well. But yeah, so we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. I'm off to London next week, as is Hanselman, for NDC London, although I think I'll be here on Tuesday, so we'll still have the show next week. John, you're not coming this time, right?
I'm not.
Okay.
No.
So it'll be Fowler and I, and Hanselman is going. I think Guthrie is going this year as well. And there might be some other folks from Microsoft, but that's the only ones I know off the top of my head. But other than that, I'm not traveling this year, so I'll be here every week. I'll do a show every week, other than the week I'm in London, the week after next. But other than that, we brought Alana along because we made one of the changes that we made as part of the new year was revisiting how we manage the issues in our repo. We had some discussions internally in December about whether we wanted to experiment and trial with some different approaches to managing the issues. For those who don't know, we have quite a lot of repos in the ASP.NET org on GitHub. Some of them contain very little code, and some of them are very, very low traffic. They don't have a lot of issues in them, and they may have some active issues or some issues that are there that haven't been talked about in a long period of time, or they may just not have very many issues at all. And so to try and alleviate that, but we also have this home repo where we do have a lot of issues. Had a lot of issues, and we did. So we did, and a lot of them were very stale, and there were actually many hundreds of them. And so it had gotten to the point where it was becoming very difficult if we wanted to try and address this problem of issues potentially appearing in multiple places. How are we going to go about sort of rationalizing that? We also had a lot of instances where people just didn't know where to log an issue. And it's not limited to just ASP.NET. We'd often have issues logged in the .NET repos that were really for ASP.NET, and so we'd have a lot of issues that have to be moved. But we'd very, very often have issues logged in the home repo, which really should have been logged in one of the sub repos. And then for whatever reason, for better or worse, mostly our fault, they just would sit there and not really have anywhere near the attention that they should have. I think there were like 700 open issues or something.
Yeah, over 700.
All right, in the home, which is not a good state to be in, even for, large projects obviously going to have a lot of issues, but I think it's fair to say that we had a lot of open issues in the home repo that just weren't active. And there probably, a lot of detail in there that should get attention. And so as an effort to try and improve that this year, we decided to basically declare bankruptcy on a lot of issues that were over a certain period, over a certain age. That is, they hadn't been active. No one had commented on them in 3 months? 3 months. 3 months. And of course, anyone's free to reopen issues in the home repo. You can always do that. If you think that needs to be talked about, then you can bump it to the top of the list again.
If you created the issue, you can reopen.
Right.
But if you just ping myself or Damien,
then we can do it.
We'll reopen it.
And then the other thing we looked at was for these lower traffic repos, which have very small amount of code, they don't have a lot of issues, that often also went along with they don't have the issues looked at very often. And so we decided, it's sort of two problems. If I'm a customer and I want to log an issue, how do I know which repo to do it in? And especially for these smaller repos, it can be difficult to know which one to put it in depending on what part of the system you're using. And then the other side of it, which is just our issue, the process management issue, is like, how often do we look at those repos? Just setting up alerts for all those repos isn't particularly helpful, because as you can imagine, with that many repos and then the number of issues we get, relying on email to do our triaging is not a particularly useful tool. And so we took the decision to rationalize those repos down to the home repo. So effectively, we didn't actually disable issues, but we effectively disabled issues in about 20 repos, the 20 lowest traffic repos. And I think Alan wrote a bot that moved them all over and posted a message and saying, this is what we're doing. There's an announcement that talked about this.
If I told people that I manually did all that under a different account, would people feel less bad or more bad?
And so as a result of that, we basically we started out this experiment with the lower traffic repos, obviously, because we wanted to test the waters and see how well this process does or does not work. And if it ends up working quite well, and we'll give it a period of time, obviously, before we make that decision, we may end up rolling this out to more of the repos, if not all of them. So including the bigger repos like Razor and Kestrel and MVC and etc., which today are still maintaining all their issue management in those repos. And as part of looking at this, we looked at all the pros and cons of doing it. There are some some features that we wanted to be able to use in GitHub that we couldn't with the current setup. Things like projects are difficult to do. If you want to do a project that it contains issues across multiple repos, you can't do that unless it's an organizational project, but normal users can't see org projects. Only organizational users can do that. And we wanted to experiment with using that to track the large features for a release. And then all the stuff I've already talked about, the ability for a customer to know where to log repos. We literally have like many dozens of repos that you validly could put an issue in, depending on what part of the system you're using. Yep. And I think the history has shown us that that's probably just too many. I think it's fair to say that the repo granularity was initially set up not with the idea of issue management in mind, but with the experience of developers who are coding. And a lot of if you think back to how Project.json and DNX worked, which is when we built these repos, there was a tight mirror between the repo granularity and how Project.json works, the ability to substitute packages for source, going in and being able to make a code change in a single repo and look at the effects of that without having to build the entire system. Those were kind of the foundations upon which the original repo architecture was designed. I don't think that architecture was particularly good for issue management, for a framework the size of ours, which isn't, it's not small, it's not the biggest framework in the world, but it's a decent sized framework with about I don't know, 30 people at Microsoft who have to deal with those issues, and then obviously a much larger audience outside of that who have different needs. And so we're trying this out. Obviously, we'll take feedback. Obviously, anytime we make any type of change that's impactful, especially one that impacts people's inboxes, we get lots of good feedback, which we have. And sorry about the sudden increase of email on day one of the new year. That's never a good thing. I would say from personal experience, if you're relying on email to get your notifications about stuff happening in GitHub, I think there are better ways, but maybe I get a lot more than most people. Maybe it works well for some people, but certainly with the scale that we work at, email, I find, just does not work at all for being notified about
unless
things.
you have very detailed rules.
Incredibly specific
Outlook or
things.
Gmail
Right.
To filter things.
So we're trying things. Now, there are other repos that Microsoft, some fairly large teams in the .NET community have done this already quite successfully. So NuGet does this today. They have single repo. Roslyn.
They actually have two. They have one for client.
Okay, one for client, one for server.
NuGet Home, I think, for most issues, and then NuGet Gallery, I think, for gallery issues.
That makes a lot of sense because there's a much smaller audience for gallery, I would assume.
Very disconnected worlds as well.
Roslyn is another one that comes up. Roslyn does a pretty good job of managing and triaging issues and labeling them with sub-labels for the different parts of the product. And then CoreFX, like the actual .NET repo, CoreFX, which contains it's not one thing. It sounds like it's one thing, but net standard library is in CoreFX, but as is many dozens of other packages that aren't net standard library and a whole bunch of other code as well. And then there's Core CLR, and they all use various sort of variations. That's a funny phrase of a similar theme. Like you basically a lot of issues that cover fairly disparate code bases but have some commonality in one place, and they use labels and processes and some automation bots and things to manage that. So we're going to try it out. And we as I said, we looked through the pros and cons. We acknowledge that there are some things that are harder to do with this setup, or certainly different to how you might be doing it today. And so we're going to see if we can come up with new workflows that work for both us and the community in doing so. So I think it was a couple of wrinkles in the migration too. I think at one point the bot was closing PRs that it shouldn't have been and stuff like that. But we cleaned all that up.
Yeah, I fixed those. There were. I started out. Several people asked me like, so how did you do this? I did not manually do it. I wrote a bunch of scripts. I used the octokit.net library, which comes from GitHub, and I wrote some ASP.NET Core console applications and started out migrating one issue. And then you can probably look at the timestamps. You can probably see the rate at which I did things. You can see when they were created. So I did one issue and then 4 more issues.
Right.
Fixed a few bugs, have to manually fix a few things, but then I ran the bot overnight because it took a while.
Took a while?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, GitHub has very strict rate limiting that is undocumented.
Right.
So you talked about like using labels and stuff. Are there like some tools or things that you guys use to manage all these? Like we
have a tool called Alon over his morning coffee. We'll look at the issues. So we talked about that, right? I think we said very strictly that we didn't want to preempt what the automation would be. We wanted to do it manually first and figure out like what are we finding ourselves doing a lot, and then we'll automate that. Exactly. And so if we find that we're just looking at issues and looking for the hot word Kestrel, in that case, that should be moved to the Kestrel repo. Like that problem will still exist, and we've done nothing to date to solve that problem. And so I think this, if the only good that comes out of this is that there's a renewed attention on how issues are getting logged for ASP.NET, who sees them, how quickly they get assigned to the right person, that'll be worthwhile. Even if you have to roll back everything, but we create some new tools to make that better, I think it'll be worthwhile. Because I think it's fair to say that we got into a situation where there were so many repos and so many issues, so much debt, that it was difficult for us to look at that and figure out, well, this is how we're going to resolve it, but keep the same process that we have right now. We figured it was a good time to try something a little bit different and see if we could come out the other side with a better process. And it's not finished yet. Like we still, we have the process for servicing. I still want us to clarify some of that as well. So if you find a bug now, that especially that we're moving beyond 2.0 into 2.1 and etc., but we have been releasing servicing releases. So we're at like 2.04, I think now. 2.05. Coming out soon. Yeah. So like, what is the process for I found a bug and I want it to be considered for servicing of the current release rather than please fix it in the next release. And then once we get to a minor and then we have the 2 train thing happening again, where we have an LTS release and a current release, how does that work on GitHub? Like, or, for anyone, like, how do we manage, we found this bug and we fixed it in the next minor release, but how do we mark it as a candidate for the patch? And like, I want all that to be very transparent, very clear, so that we don't, we mitigate or minimize the opportunity of making mistakes. Because, it happens. It's a complicated world we live in, and we want to make sure that it's as much process around this as necessary to reduce the amount of times we get things wrong. So,
Is there any kind of like dashboard or something? Like I know there's the GitHub projects, but I'm guessing they wouldn't scale to that level. Like the GitHub project is like a Kanban board sort of thing.
Yeah, so we've been using GitHub projects to sort of do the 10,000-foot view of a milestone. So, for example, we used it during our 2.1 planning, internal planning exercise. We're now using it for our sort of active work exercise. So it only focuses on features. It doesn't cover, obviously, like tracking bugs and things in a project isn't particularly helpful. It's just too big. There's too many of them, especially at the scale of ASP.NET. Maybe for a very small library, it makes a lot of sense. We also use projects.
Use projects within.
We use projects, I was about to say, like within repos, we use projects for feature areas. So in MVC, which is quite a large framework, we are doing targeted work, like in 2.1 around APIs, which we call COD, and we have some stuff around Razor. So we have sub-projects that we've created so that sub-parts of the team can organize their work. And like, it's not stipulated. We don't say it must have these columns or anything. They just kind of self-organize and do that so we can quickly see. But from my point of view as the PM, I was very interested in using projects just to be able to see a large dashboard that's like, here's the scope of what we are planning for this current or the current work. And then by looking at that, I can say, this is what's currently been assigned and is being worked on. This is the ordered, prioritized backlog of things to go in this next, like for basically when a developer becomes free and they need to pick what work to do next, other than bugs, what is the next thing they pick off the backlog, right? So raw GitHub issues don't help you with that. There's no prioritization. You need to use something that can give you prioritization for that. Projects give you that capability because you can order them. So we've been starting to use it for that. And then we can very quickly see, oh, we have enough work right now, if you just basically correlate a card with the number of people that we have, to fill the team with work. It also allows you to very quickly see this feature area is owned by this program manager and this developer, okay, which is also useful. We can make sure that the right people are involved in decisions. And so we've been using projects for that point of view. As Christian just pointed out, though, the problem with organization-wide projects is that only we can see them. I wanted to make, you have to be a member of the organization to see an organization-wide project, and only organization-wide projects can have issues in them from multiple repos. That's a limitization of the org projects. And so I would very much like to be able to have our active work project at some point be open to everyone. So anyone can just go and see what's the team currently work on when it comes to features and enhancements, like things that aren't bugs. What are they working on? What's the priority? What's currently assigned? Who do I talk to as a community member if I want to ask questions? Like who is going to give me answers? And what's up next? Where can I look at the list of things that we're thinking about so I can go and make a case for changing that priority? Like that information is not captured anywhere in GitHub today. There's no tool in GitHub that lets you do that other than projects. But if you're spread across multiple repos, they don't help you. And so there's a hope that by making some of these changes, we could start to leverage some of those tools down the, I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it's a hope. So that's why we can't just use org-wide projects for everything. So, yeah.
Cool.
Do you think there's any validity in any of the comments yet? Any good comments? Any enlightening comments?
So as I think Alarm pointed out in one of the responses, your mic got a little weird there, by the way, Scott. Put your boom down, I think. Thanks.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Thank you very much. The sun is going down as well.
So far, I think most of the comments, the cons that people have pointed out are all things that we had considered so far. I don't think there's been anything so far that was like, oh my God, we didn't really think of that. We had considered all of those and determined that we felt the potential benefits of this experiment could outweigh those cons. Now, I'm not saying, like, as in all things, whenever you try, unfortunately, there isn't really a good way of A/B testing this or like doing it in parallel. Like you kind of just have to try it and deal with the pain and then determine whether it was worthwhile with the benefits. And so that's what we're doing. But yeah, like everything that I've seen pointed out so far, like we did talk about and go, well, yeah.
Yeah, to be clear, we absolutely agree that some of the negatives are pretty negative. Like you cannot subscribe to one repo's notifications and only see those notifications. Like that's a problem. And maybe the result is we draw a line somewhere and certain popular repos don't get migrated into home, or maybe we decide, no, well, I've heard today, because this affects not only the community, it affects people here also working on on this project. And I've heard that there do exist some tools out there that let you get notifications filtered by only certain labels. So as Damien mentioned, we will make sure that we at least tag things with appropriate repo label. So every issue in the home repo, we have a repo colon, whatever the appropriate repo is. So repo colon HTTP abstractions, repo colon, whatever it is. And that there exist tools out there that people have written that let you get notifications filtered based on these things. And so we might be able to recommend some of these tools for people because we think everybody might need it. And so that is a negative. Okay, well, I have to use another tool now. That's not ideal. We agree that's not ideal, but what I think the conclusion we've arrived at is that no tool exists that solves all of the problems. Like we could just remove the issue trackers from GitHub. Like we considered that at one point a long time ago to use some other system. We experimented with using Jira, which is a very popular bug tracking tool. And you've seen that probably used in some other projects you work with. And there are just too many downsides to using Jira. It's not synced with GitHub. The permissions are different. It just didn't work for us. So we tried that and it didn't work. And we've been doing what we're doing for a few years now. And we think there are some shortcomings. One of the comments, good comment in the chat, in the YouTube chat, is why couldn't we just write some tools for our own issue management? Well, we have, but even they have limitations. There's a tool that I wrote. I'm apparently somehow in charge of all bugs.
Well,
everywhere.
Being the engineering manager for ASP.NET and EF Core.
Oh, I guess
that's probably why.
I guess that makes sense. I guess that makes sense. Yeah. It's the only code I get to write, so they don't let me write code in any of the repos. So we've written tools that help us monitor things across different repos, and even they have limitations. Part of it is, excuse me, is there a cough button on this?
There is. It's on the other. Sorry.
How about I'll pretend to cough on you, and then you'll press the button,
yes.
And then I'll cough. Okay. The problem with having so many repos, so we have over 50 repos that have code in it that is part of the product. And that includes about 10 or so private repos that have some internal infrastructure that we use that's not really usable outside of Microsoft. And that tool internally gets a lot of complaints because it takes forever to load the list of repos that you want, because it has to make, I think, about 300 different GitHub API queries to pull up the page to see the whole state of the project, because it has to do one query to get all the issues, and then there's additional metadata we need for certain issues. We have to get all the pull requests and metadata about the pull requests and all these kinds of things. And it takes about 30 seconds to refresh the page. And so we've written tools and we've tried working on optimizing it. We have made improvements to it, but even they have limitations. And so we're just trying to find the right balance between these different things. And again, we agree with the feedback that we've gotten. We just think that the balance is kind of, I guess, yet to be found. Really, we don't know where the balance is.
And as someone's pointed out, like, we are not the only org that is expressed this not concern, but like has found that once you get to a certain size on GitHub, I haven't seen like the canonical, this is how you manage large issues, like large frameworks with issues on GitHub. Like everyone has tried different things, and everyone has said GitHub issues isn't enough by itself, and that's why all these tools exist. And but you know, every project has slightly varying needs. But anyway,
as pointed out here, Carol Zickman did on the .NET team did a I've seen him do a presentation at .NET Fringe talking about how they manage issues, and he's got some sort of tool for that. And then someone else on this also pointed out Octobox, which I think probably works, but I don't know if it would scale to.
A lot of devs here use Octobox, I believe, to look at their own issues.
Yeah, that's the one that I heard mentioned this morning. And actually, one of my engineering managers is IM'd me. Yeah, so Octobox.io. I haven't used it, so I cannot speak for it. I've heard quite a few people mention it.
I find out a lot of the issues from Twitter. There's a couple of bots that exist on Twitter. There's a .NET Core Issues bot and an ASP.NET Core Issues bot, which I have I have a search column in TweetDeck for like anything related to .NET and ASP.NET, just a whole bunch of terms. And so they show up in there. And so I actually find, I discover many of the issues just by when I look at Twitter, I see them when I scan that thing. And so it saves me having to go to the GitHub, because, you know, there is a GitHub sort of, I think there's a GitHub view where you can basically any org you're. Yeah, I know Fowler spends a lot of his day just looking at that, and I just can't do it. Like, there's just so much stuff on that. But I do find that, yeah, I don't look at every issue. Obviously, there's just too many of them. I think, and there are, I think there's 3 program managers and there's 2 engineering managers plus you, and that's not a lot of people when
I mean, how big is your entire team, Damien?
Including
you,
including me, 4.
Yeah. So my team is 31
yeah.
people.
So it's 31 versus 4.
That's everybody. So this is how, I mean, not asking anybody to feel sorry for
No,
it because I enjoyed it, but I wrote all the spot like on vacation or holiday, as some of you might call it, over the last few days. Like, you know, yesterday was not a work day, nor were the 2 days before that. And that's when I was just like, oh, I'll sit, you know, watching the new episode of the new season of Black Mirror. So watch that. Haven't finished it. No spoilers.
We're all inside a computer simulation.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's what they're all about usually.
Yeah.
But I do genuinely hope that this will make it easier. I mean, and when we look at the pros and cons, we do prioritize certain audiences over others. I mean, let's be totally honest. Like we tend to prioritize people who might be coming to log or find an issue for the first time, or who don't use GitHub as frequent, like every day. So I think it is quite daunting showing up to the ASP.NET repo for the first time, or org, I should say, and going, wait, there's 50 repos that contain code. Which one should I go to? Now, obviously, the home repo, we did a lot of work to try and make it so that you land in the home repo first.
And we had a lot of issues.
And we had a lot of issues there as a result. But we didn't really have a good process because all the issues that we worked on daily as developers and PMs were in the other repos. And so, again, part of this is to try and, if we centralize the gaze towards one place, it'll likely get more attention, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. Like I said, we'll monitor and we'll.
And there's some really good comments in here, you know, about poking GitHub. And to GitHub's credit, a lot of the features, sometimes you feel like they've been there forever, but Github Projects, that's a brand new feature. It's only been around a few months. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other features that we use? So like things like issue templates didn't, you know, some of these things didn't exist or weren't as powerful as they used to be. And so, you know, we're hopeful that, you know, GitHub might add things, and, you know, GitHub, of course, unfortunately, don't have a great way of requesting features kind of in the public. There's the kind of the Dear GitHub feature, which is, I believe, completely unofficial. But you know, we're hopeful, but we do sometimes have to kind of work around some of the software limitations that exist there. You know, or even the feature that you can even pin repos to the top of an org. So if you go to github.com/ASP.NET, that pinning thing there, it's not brand new, but it's been there maybe a year or so. It's not a very old feature. So we did pin, you know, the 6 or so, I think 6 kind of most common ones. The home repo is the top one, and then MVC, Kestrel, Razor, Entity Framework Core, and Docs. And you know, but you know, you can only pin 6. We can't pin
announcements,
or announcements. Now, one thing is worth noting, for example, the announcements repo, we have currently no plan of combining that, because the announcements repo is meant to be the super low traffic. There's, you know, you'd be lucky to even see one post there a day, and we lock all the issues there. And if some of you might remember, because I know some of the people here in the chat are people who've been around for ages and ages. The announcements repo was created as a non-Firehose kind of case, where we actually initially, some of you might remember the camel case fiasco of, I don't know, 2015 or something like that. Some of you probably commented on there. I won't name names. And we didn't used to lock issues on the announcements repo. And people were complaining about all the spam and all the noise. And we started locking all the issues and created discussion issues on the home repo. So we took that feedback and we took it seriously. And I think with the announcements repo, we ended up in a much better place. I think it's kind of been serving its purpose. But, you know, we'll have to see with the home repo experiment, emphasis on experiment. And I've been reading all the feedback. Damien's been reading the feedback, and, you know, hopefully we can come up with something that makes everybody equally unhappy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best we can really hope for in a democracy, or a republic, as this is really more. So Christian makes a point, which I think I tried to address, but he says, don't you find it ironic that you haven't been able to handle the issues in home already, but still want to funnel everything else into the same bucket, everything else in the same bucket? And that's what I meant by saying that by focusing more on it, you tend to find solutions to those issues. I think the reality is no one codes in home today. And so the issues in home, if I want to be incredibly blunt and a little unfair, basically go there to die before what we did a few days ago. Because it wasn't part of any developer's workflow on the team. It wasn't part of an engineering manager's workflow or even a PM. Everything we do day to day is about managing the work that developers on the team are doing majorly, or it's answering email. And the home repo just wasn't part of that flow. Now, it is now fundamentally part of that flow, because that's where issues have to be logged for 20 of the repos. And so my hope is that it becomes a forcing function to try and fix that. And it's an acknowledgement of that issue. It's an acknowledgement of our failing, as we had 700 open issues in there that were frankly just completely forgotten about. And so, as I said at the beginning, in some ways we declared bankruptcy on those ones, and we're starting again afresh with a modified process, and we'll see how this one works out. We don't profess to get it right. We're going to try it out and see how it goes. Anyone who's ever worked on a large project will know that process change is part of refining how you work on something, and changing stuff as you go along, as you learn stuff, is what you do. So bear with us. We're going to try it out and see how it goes, and we'll figure it out. And Christian, it's sad to have to work around. Yeah, I mean, he's saying it's sad you have to work around quote unquote missing GitHub features. And I will say we've been making that same complaint to people at GitHub for many, many years. To be fair, like, they didn't build GitHub solely for projects like ours. It has to cater for a massive spectrum of different project types, and they've done very well. I mean, they've added a lot of features that I've been pleasantly surprised. And they don't. The thing is, they also just tend to drop them on the world. Like, we don't know them until they blog. Like, oh, this new feature is now available. Have fun. Like, there was no development phase that was public. It was all just kind of, this is how they do stuff at GitHub.
I remember GitHub didn't even have a code review feature.
No,
just a few months ago.
That's right.
You could comment on things, but you couldn't approve or reject. I mean, that, which I think to a lot of people seems like that's the most trivial feature ever, in terms of not the simplicity or complexity of building it,
right,
in terms of the necessity of having it. And even that's a very new feature on GitHub.
Right.
Wow, we use it now all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it showed up one day. Like,
it showed up one day. Oh, code review is great.
The UI is different.
Project showed up one day. Like, I think there's the protected branches showed up one day.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of really, and those things aren't needed in small projects. Protected branches is very much around large code bases with lots of branches, lots of people contributing, and you want to ensure that you don't accidentally push stuff into the wrong place that's considered your master or whatnot. So, yeah. So I think a lot of those features we've been happy to see get. I think issues is one of those areas where you could argue that they could add a lot more sort of advanced stuff, but I think the pushback would be anything they add beyond what they have right now would very much become what's the word I'm looking for? It has to be opinionated by definition. Like, right now, issues are very rudimentary. You have an issue, you can put arbitrary labels on it, and you can put them in milestones, and you can assign multiple people, which is also new because it used to just be single assignment.
10 assignees.
Anything beyond that requires them to sort of stipulate structure. Like, there's no related issues today. You can tag issues, but they're not formally related. You can't do hierarchies, for example. And we trialed building bots to create hierarchy, trying to mimic, like, you could define a feature or a user story, and then you would have associated work items. Like, there's nothing like that in GitHub. The projects are very much a reaction to people building Kanban boards and those type of things for GitHub, and they seem to work pretty well, except for the things that we've talked about. When you get to multi repos, they're a problem. And so, yeah,
cool.
I hope that at least shares our thoughts behind it, and keep giving us the feedback, and we'll be patient. You be patient, please, and we'll figure it out. But if it all works out and it all turns out to be a terrible idea, then we'll go back or try something else. So
yeah, and we'll probably create some effigy of .NET, of the ASP.NET
of the bot,
and
another bot to come and hunt down that bot and purge it.
It needs a cute logo for one thing. Like,
I made a logo for it.
What does it look like? The other
in MS Paint? Can you project it onto?
What, you have a logo?
Yeah,
I didn't notice our logo.
Did it not?
Every time I saw it, it was just one of the default.
I did it during some meeting.
ASP.NET Hello. Here we go. The very first issue. Oh, you did! Look at that. You literally made it in Paint.
I made it in MS Paint.
You could have at least made it in the new 3D Paint and made it shiny.
I do have a brand new Surface that I can Surface Book 2 that I can maybe somehow do something fancy.
It is 5 o'clock.
Yes.
It's always 5 o'clock.
Scott, do you have any comment to add?
My comment is that it's 5 o'clock and we can't keep doing 75-minute shows.
But they're so much fun. Well, it would have been 75 minutes if someone had turned up on time.
I apologize.
Do you have any thoughts for the new year before we sign off?
My honest thought for how many people are here, John?
81.
Isn't it just hard to get back to work? I mean, it's hard. Like, I like my job, very happy. happy to pay the rent. Thank you, Microsoft, for paying me money. But when I'm on vacation for 2 weeks at Christmas time, I feel very retired. I did not know my password this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a password reset, which was fun. Are you guys positive and upbeat and like awake, or do you feel this week is kind of a crappy week and you're going to feel better next week?
So I had about 9 days off. I didn't have a full 2 weeks off, but I did try. I worked very hard to ensure that I did not think about work during those 9 days. Like I was very much
exactly. That's exactly what I did.
And it wasn't really until last night that I allowed myself to think about what I would want to achieve in this short week because I'm going to London next week, as are you, Scott.
Yep.
I mentioned when you were out of the room. And there's some stuff I have to get done before then. But so like, yes, I agree. It was lovely not thinking about work for a week, and I'd like to be able to figure out how to do that more often. It'd be great.
Excellent.
Oh. All right. Catch you later.
To that point, I forget which of these buttons does the dramatic zoom out, so I'll just try one. You ready? You locked on me, John? You better lock on me.
No. Oh.
Also, John, did you use the cameraman feature that makes it full screen?
Yes, probably.
That's a step you always got to remember. Otherwise, there's a little row of us at the bottom.
There is it's full screen with us overlaid on top, which I think is the correct thing, right? No?
Yes. No, full screen is full screen.
Okay. Oh, well. John, you had best.
We'll have to let's do a retake.
We'll just do it in post. That's fine. All right, you ready? I'm going to push this button. We'll see if it does it.
Is this new? Dramatic.
It worked. It's so dramatic. Happy New Year, everybody.